Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I think everybody's joining us just now. My name is Stephen Bain, and I head up our Games and Digital Sector Group here at MHA Henderson Loggie. I'm really delighted to welcome you all to this afternoon's webinar, aimed at those with an interest in starting up a games business. Here at MHA Henderson Loggie, we love helping businesses start up and watch them grow. We offer advice and support at every stage. Back in October, as part of our Business Startup Week, we ran a webinar about starting your own business. That webinar was aimed at businesses in general and covered many common themes, such as cash flow, whether to trade as a limited company and how to set up a company, how to pay staff and account for taxes, setting up an accounting system, raising finance, and so on. There's some great content in that webinar, and after the event today, we'll share the YouTube link to that. But while that webinar was aimed at new businesses in general, this afternoon's event focuses specifically on the games sector. We're very aware that the games sector has its own specific needs. We've been advising clients in the sector for many years and have worked with some of the biggest names in the industry. We're proud to act for so many games companies of all size, and we have a great network of contacts in the sector to call upon. And that's what has made it possible for us to put on this event today. I'm really excited that we've got a great lineup of speakers for you. First, you'll hear from Jamie Bankhead, a recent graduate of Abertay University, whose recently established company, Konglomerate Games, has already won several awards. We then have two very experienced and successful games entrepreneurs. David Hamilton of Ninja Games will speak about mentorship and business development. And Colin Anderson of Denki will give some great insight on negotiating with publishers. We then have Grant Snedden of our own corporate tax department, who will talk specifically about HMRC's video games tax relief. And once you've heard from each speaker, we'll do a short question and answer session. We've had a few questions submitted in advance, and feel free to use the chat panel as we go to submit any questions that spring to mind. We can't promise to answer everything in the time available, but we'll share contact details after the session if there's anything you'd like to come back on. But before we kick off with the publicised lineup, I'm delighted to say we're also being joined today by Josh Smith of industry body TIGA, who's going to give us a brief update on what is happening at TIGA. So without further ado, Josh, over to you.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for having me along today. I'm from TIGA. We're the industry trade association representing the whole of the UK video games industry, as well as education institutions, teaching video games courses at university, and other research organisations. We've led the campaign initially for the introduction of video games tax relief back in 2014. VGTR has played a crucial role in enabling the UK video games industry to compete on a level playing field with competitors around the world. We've continued since then, since 2014, to continue to campaign for improvements for VGTR, most recently releasing a report arguing for an uplift in the rate of VGTR, and are hoping to get this passed as soon as possible. We're also looking at other schemes such as a video games investment fund, which provide matched funding to video games companies backed by HM Treasury. We represent organisations across the UK and have continued to lobby government, parliament, and as well as the devolved administrations. And we're delighted to be working with companies like MHA in providing help to startup games businesses who are trying to make those first steps on the ladder to success. So thank you very much. And I believe I now pass on to Jamie.
Thanks very much, Josh. I'm just going to share my screen here. Can everybody see that? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie from Konglomerate Games. We are a video games company specializing in what we call serious games. So games that have an educational or a kind of healthcare focus. And hopefully I'll be able to give a bit of insight of what it's like to start a games company out of university. We're relatively new. We only went full-time June last year. So I'll try and kind of give my experience and our kind of journey and the processes we went through. Any questions, yeah, feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll try and answer them as well. So to give a bit of an idea about what we do, just to give an example, one of our games is a game developed around the physiotherapy care of children with cystic fibrosis. So it's this chronic lung condition where they have to do these really boring breathing exercises. And because they're so boring, no one does them. So what we've done is using this device here, which can be attached to their physiotherapy device, we can detect their breath and kind of turn it into input for the computer, which we've then taken and we use their breath to play our game. So we make it a bit more fun for them. But yeah, those are the kind of games that we do, as well as work for hire for various clients as well. So to give you an idea of our journey, we started kind of in university back in 2019 as a third-year project module. So we kind of came together and we're connected to Microsoft and UCL, who built the sensor, which I was talking about before. And this was part of our university project, but we wanted to take it further. So we kept kind of developing it, and we finished our module, but kept going and thought we should start applying to different grants and competitions. And we were lucky enough to win the International Serious Play Award, which meant we got to go to Montreal and Florida to kind of show our game off, which was really important for us because it kind of started building our network of potential clients and people that we could kind of reach out to for support and getting our game kind of spread as well. And from there, we kind of realized we wanted to take it even further and form a company around serious games. But what we needed to do was kind of build up a bit of cash to kind of get us going. So we applied for various competitions within Scotland and the UK. The first one being the Converge Challenge, which has 3 kind of categories. We went into the impact category. Because we're kind of a serious games company, we can apply for more generic competitions, like generic business competitions, because we've got a bit of a social impact base. But just for reference, there's a creative challenge as well that Converge offer that I know that Yaldi Games, another games company based in Edinburgh, actually won this year, which is great. So please don't feel like you're a games company so you can't apply for normal business competitions and grants and stuff. So yeah, from there we had a bit of funding. The runner-up prize got us £10,000 of cash, which was really important to get us started. And we actually officially founded then late 2019 whilst at university. And I should say that this is where being part of Abertay was really helpful because of Bell Street Ventures, which is the kind of business advice group. I think I saw Simon's name in chat. He's the guy you want to talk to if you're part of Abertay. But I know most universities will have some kind of form of this. Dundee has a great one. I know Strathclyde has a great business support group, but pretty much any university will have some version of this. And yeah, we officially founded the company. It's actually quite easy. It's only like £10. I mean, I'm talking about the form you have to fill in is easy, not actually doing it. And yeah, from there then, we needed more funding, so more competitions. The Unlock Challenge got us, I think, another £10,000. They also provided business support. And between them, then we could apply for the UK Games Fund, which has been really pivotal for us because not only did they provide some funding, but they also let you access their communities of other games companies, which is really important because you can kind of see what everyone else is doing and see what you should be doing as well, which is a big thing for us. And yeah, they've continued to support us as well, still are, which is great. From there, then I finished university. So up until now, this was all still done while we were working on our dissertations and stuff. And it was pretty tough having to balance the two. But I'd say it's a good idea to kind of test your ideas while you're at uni because you've kind of got a bit of a support net or like a safety net, sorry. And you don't need to rely on the company to be successful, to succeed. Like there's not as much risk there if you kind of do it while still at uni. It is a lot of hard work though. And yeah, thankfully from the starting cash from the different competitions, we were able to go full time then in June. I can tell you that just to be really blunt, so you all know for figures and stuff, we had around £30,000 starting cash. which may seem like a lot, but for 4 full-time employees, that's not actually that much. It doesn't get you very far at all, as I'm sure the other guys will be able to agree with. And yeah, so what we needed to do was kind of apply for more funding in various places. Santander Universities was another one. Santander are affiliated with a lot of universities in the UK, and they run this big national competition. We were lucky enough to go through that, and they offer business support as well. And then Unlocking Ambition was the next one we kind of went to. That's part of Scottish Enterprise that we're now part of. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to give a kind of the really roundabout way that we've kind of gone about setting up a games company. But just to kind of give you a very broad idea of the things that are available in Scotland and in the UK, there's so much that you can access. For example, like, I don't really know what we'll be doing next, but there's a scheme that we're looking at, the Kickstart scheme, which is a government-run initiative for getting interns. I know a lot of games companies in Dundee are utilising it, or going to utilise it. But yeah, there's loads of different support schemes that you can access. I kind of listed a bunch of them that I could think of. So if you want to take a screenshot of anything, feel free to take a screenshot of this. But we've spoken to all of these. They've all provided support in some way at one stage. Henderson, Loggie, of course, at the bottom, had to add them. They've been a great help for us. And yeah, that's kind of the journey we've gone through. The biggest challenges, I'd say, was that I had no idea what I was doing. Still don't really. I probably would have came to this talk as well, which is good, to hear what David and Colin have to say. But that's one of the great things about games, is that you can learn off other companies that are further ahead of you. Personally, like Pocket Size Hands and Hyperluminal and Tag are all in Dundee, and they're great to learn from. Just kind of see what other people are doing and copy them is my biggest insight. And I had obviously zero experience starting a company, or in a games company especially. But yeah, I just had to learn as you go, and learn from what everyone else is doing. Like I said, we had no money, like personally, and obviously student debt. I'm from Northern Ireland, so I didn't get free university. But I would say that you just need a head for managing cash flow as well. It's not, you can't just have a game idea. Like making a game and starting a games company are two very different things. You need to kind of have an idea of cash flow and stuff as well if you want to make a games company. And yeah, like I mentioned, uni at the same time was pretty tough, but it did have its benefits in that we had a bit of a safety net if it didn't work. So yeah, tips I'd say is make sure you want to do it. It's really hard. So make sure it is actually something you want to do, because there are easier things you can do. Get a job, it's easier. But another one would be network as much as you can and practice doing it. So come to events like this and talk to people that you're interested in talking to. Don't do it like you need something out of them, or you're doing it to get something from them, because that comes across really, really badly. But just for an example, people I met at the Serious Play conferences have actually become clients further down the line. And that wasn't because I was trying to sell to them or anything. It was just because I was just chatting to them and they remembered us further down the line. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I'd say don't worry if you fail, because if you do start a company, it looked like it's really impressive to even have tried. So being able to say that you have, I'm sure will get you places at other companies as well. But yeah, thank you very much. And hopefully something was positive from that. And any questions, feel free to ask me in the chat or to follow up afterwards. Thank you.
Jamie, thank you very much. That was a really useful insight. And you know, I met you a couple of years ago, and when you were still at university, and I think it's really exciting to see you on this journey, and wish you every success. Hopefully, we'll be part of that journey with you. Now I'm going to pass across to David Hamilton of Ninja Kiwi Games. David.
Thanks, Stephen. First of all, welcome everybody, and I'm just really happy there I remembered to unmute myself. I was saying that before the chat. So I'm here to speak about finding a mentor and the importance of having a mentor, and also the importance of business development. So I'm David Hamilton, Executive Vice President of Ninja Kiwi. Like Jamie, we started out at university with a company called Digital Goldfish that eventually got acquired by Ninja Kiwi in 2012. We've got 32 staff in the Dundee office and, well, our virtual office now, or we did have 32 staff in the office, and about 35 in the New Zealand office. So when we first started, the game was called Baby Grow. It was a mobile phone game that was based on my university project. And again, like Jamie, didn't have a clue how to start a games company, what to do. So again, it's just all about making it up as you kind of go along, what you think is going to work, try it out. One thing that we did do wrong, myself and my business partner Barry, was we went and actually did it without doing too much research into it. So we took out, I think it was £12,000 worth of advertising in all the top kind of local magazines like Beano, Dandy, Ms, Top of the Pops, Shout. We had a full page advertorial selling direct to consumer and rented an SMS gateway. Now the cross readership of all the magazines was like 5 million. So we were doing, oh, only if we do a percentage chance, it will be selling at £4, we'll be overnight millionaires. And we genuinely believed it. And we spent the £12,000 and we probably made £1,000 back if we were lucky. And people thought we were daft back then selling direct to consumer, but I'd like to say we were geniuses ahead of our time if you look at mobile games now being advertised at the Super Bowl. But yeah, all joking aside, we didn't do our research. We didn't really know how to sell mobile phone games at that time. And yeah, we lost a bit of money on that. And it was all personally guaranteed. It wasn't like myself and Barry had any cash. So it was a PSYBT loan and a bank overdraft. But one thing it did do was I notified Scottish Enterprise about us, and they seen what we'd done and thought, right, we better help these guys out. So I remember this, met Joyce Matthew, who's just actually retired from Scottish Enterprise, and she says, right, we need to find you a business mentor, somebody you guys can get on with, somebody who could tell you what you need to do, somebody you're going to listen to, because obviously myself and Barry, if you've met us before, we do like to have a bit of a laugh. So we needed somebody there enough to kind of tell us off if we went too far. So anyway, this person was a Mark Kettle from Cobra Mobile, who's still around, and Joyce Matthew, the three of us, me, myself, Joyce, went to Mark Ettle's office. I remember it. He was like the top guy in mobile development back then, did Lego bricks and Sensible Soccer and all the top games. And we were so nervous going to it. And his waiting room was bigger than our office we had at Abertay. We then got moved to his boardroom, and it was honestly like something out of a TV show how big his boardroom was. He made us wait. We were sweating. Our palms were sweating. And then all of a sudden, here he comes in the room. And I remember this, and I don't know who's all in here, so I won't swear, but he looks at Baby Grow on the phone, throws it back at us, and tells us it's basically SHIT. And I couldn't believe it in front of Joyce Matthew. He said this, but he was doing it as a test. Like, he would send us every week when we'd go meet him, every month, I think back then we met him, he would send us tasks to go away and do. And he was doing it to make sure that we listened to him and took his advice. And now to this day, he's a great friend of mine, and still keep in contact with him, still listen to what he's got. He still helps me out. And yeah, that was him. He just wanted to make sure we weren't going to fold, and we were tough enough to get through it. And honestly, we wouldn't be here today without Mark. He basically taught us how you contact people. So back then, I was probably contacting them from a Hotmail address. Now that would probably be Gmail now, before you think I'm that bad. But I was probably telling them myself and Barry's life stories. I was probably telling them we were working part-time as well, funding it, and we just needed our break. And it was Mark that taught us stuff like email signatures and have something set on your website, so when you first go there, you get the wow factor. Say stuff like we, don't say Barry and I. We could be 10 people, not just me and Barry graduating. And right enough, it totally worked. I mean, we started getting answers from publishers. People were responding to us. And I know it sounds embarrassing looking back then, but it was more naivety that people would want to hear us and feel sorry for us and want to give us a chance in the games industry and things. But they don't. They're going to be putting the money to you. They're going to be giving you money, basically, and they need to know that you're professional enough to do it, and yeah, not joking individuals like myself and Barry was. So find somebody that can be that person, not just somebody that you can have a laugh with. You don't necessarily want that. You want somebody, yes, you can have a laugh with, but somebody also who you're going to feel a bit like, I've just been told off, and that's what you need to do. And obviously Scottish Enterprise is still around. Obviously Joyce is retired, but contact these guys. They're the type of guys who put you in contact with other people if you don't know anybody yourself. But reach out to every games industry in Dundee, games companies in Dundee, and most of us will be given to help you. So find who you connect with, find who you want that person to be, and just ask. The worst we can say is no. So I'm all for helping people. So definitely do that. Anyway, wary of my time. I didn't even take it when I started talking about 1:15, and I could talk for Scotland. So business development is so important. Kind of like what Jamie said earlier, he touched on it. It's not just about a game. You could have the best game in the world, and if you do no business development, then you're not going to really be able to do anything with your game. And I think honestly that's how we kind of got to where we were, because I mean it's helpful, easier for me because I'm 6'8" and look like Alan Carr, but it's basically just going to speak to people. I mean, I could give you so many examples of it's who you know in the industry that helps you out. Paul Farley from Tag Games, I used to attend all the connection stuff that goes on, and it was actually Paul Farley that published our first title in mobile. So with Mark's help, publishers started responding to us and not just ignoring my Hotmail emails, and they were responding saying, oh, thank you for your game, but unfortunately we can't publish one of your titles without any of your previous games published. So it was kind of like applying for a job back then, catch-22. If you don't have experience, you don't get a job. It was actually Paul Farley who had the connections to publish from his existing role in iPlay, which was a publisher. And Paul had said that when I told him we were getting knocked back from publishers now because no games published, it was Paul that then said to me, well, do you want Tag to publish it? Obviously they took a cut, but he was doing it more of a favour for us, because for his work and the stuff that he had to put in to do that, it was just all about ticking that box for us moving forward to then be able to say, yeah, we have a title published. So again, that was just purely me. I didn't know Paul starting Digital Goldfish, didn't know Mark before starting Digital Goldfish. That was purely me just going to any event I could, just so people remembered me. And I even remember going to one called Dress for Success, an event in Scottish Enterprise. And it was probably one of the worst ones I've ever been at, to be honest. But I went there. I knew that folk would be there that I need to speak to. And like I say, come to the events. It's great all you see here, because this is the sort of stuff you need to go to. Make us remember your faces. Like obviously the Dundee drinks mix-ups before. Seeing the same people over and over again. And like I say, reach out for it. It's one of the key things to do is business development. And I'm over my time yet? No? Good? 2 minutes? So another example of it is for Apple, for when the iPhone came out. That's what changed our business basically. And it was actually Dynamo Games that gave us the contact for Apple. And again, that was just from getting on with the guys there, Brian and the two Stuarts. We would attend events, have drinks with them, get on a kind of personal laugh with them, and Apple was coming up to see them because they're a championship manager. So Apple then asked them, who else shall we meet in Dundee? Is there any other developers? And they said Tag Games, Cobra Mobile, and Digital Goldfish. So again, if Brian didn't know about Digital Goldfish, we would never have got to meet the guy from Apple, Dave Currell, who then gave us the feature on Apple, who then helped us get to the #1 spot. So again, I could, all through business development, that's what we got there. So it's #1 prio for you. It's probably more important than having a good game, is have good business development. And look at that, bang on 25 past. Thank you, people.
Dave, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. As well as keeping the time, which you're sceptical you managed to do, but it's you know, I've heard you speak before. I know you can speak for hours and hours on your journey, but it's great for the people here on the call today just to hear sort of some really great lessons from you. So really appreciate your time, thank you. Pass on to Colin Anderson from Denki.
Thank you very much, Stephen. First of all, I'd just like to reiterate everything that David said there, and Jamie as well. So there's nothing that I've heard so far that I wouldn't 100% agree with and say, yeah, that's the foundations, that's the fundamentals that you need to get in place in order to give yourself the best chance of operating a successful business in the games industry. For the purposes of my talk, I'm going to assume that everyone knows that publishers generally help to solve two problems. That's funding a game and marketing a game. And I'm also going to assume that you've already decided that you want to work with a publisher, because there's lots of reasons you might not want to work with a publisher, but we don't have time to cover those today. So for simplicity, I'm just going to talk about the typical indie situation that you have, which is your team specializes in making games, and you need a publisher to provide additional funding to let you finish it, as well as access to marketing skills to tell people that the game's available to buy. Whenever you're running a games company as a business rather than a hobby, i.e. you're expecting your game to return more money than you spend making it, then making your game is actually only half the problem you need to solve. Making an audience for your game is the other half of that problem. And most people, especially those who are newer to the industry, can underestimate just how difficult the making an audience problem is to solve. When I first started, I remember well, I used to believe what I think most of us who've grown up playing games thought, which is that great games sell themselves. But I soon learned the hard way that it's not really true, at least not most of the time. I learned the same lesson many times, which is that great games do not sell. Well-marketed games sell, and great games that are well-marketed sell lots. So you're going to be making a great game, and you need to be sure that you partner with a publisher who's going to do just as great a job of your game's marketing. That is how profitable games happen. So I'm hoping you're convinced by this point that you're going to be working with a publisher, and you want to work with a publisher rather than fund it and market it yourself, because that's the alternative, right? So where do you start? Who are publishers and how do you even get in touch with them? Well, the good news is that the helpful people at Fundamentally Games have already compiled a really good list of companies that you can approach to finance your game, and they've published it on their website. I'm just going to drop the link to it in the chat here, actually. That's the link to it there. If you go to the financier list on that website and choose the publisher category, you'll find a list of 50 publishers that you can contact about your game. There's way more than that, but if you don't know where to start, I'd recommend starting there. All the companies on that list are capable of providing the funding and marketing support that you need to turn your game into a huge hit. Now that you know who you're going to be contacting, don't do it yet. And that's really important. Before that, make sure to do your research. That was something that Dave touched on earlier. Just like developers, some publishers specialize in certain types of games. So don't spam everyone in the hope of getting a meeting, as you could waste an awful lot of time and energy doing that. It's also a really small world, and these people all talk to each other. So if you do a generic spam email to loads of publishers, they will notice and they are going to judge your submission accordingly. A better approach is to do some legwork first. So research the companies and identify no more than maybe like 5 or 6 publishers with a portfolio of games that you think your game would fit into, and go after them. Find out what games they've done, what games they have in development, who's in charge of their publishing, who their trusted lieutenants are, and whether you know anyone in your own network that can give you a warm introduction. Because again, as David touched on, the games industry leverages personal connections an awful lot. So getting a personal introduction to a publisher from a mutual acquaintance is always going to be preferable to a cold email. That said, don't panic if you've not got a connection already. If you do your homework and you're able to make a strong impression when you get in touch, then you're able to talk about their portfolio and the titles they have in development. You're already going to be head and shoulders above an awful lot of the companies that they talk to on a daily basis. So once you've got that figured out, you need to understand that you're going to have to get your game ready to present. And you're going to have to present it in a way that's as dazzling as it possibly can be, right? It's just like job interviews or first dates. You need your game to make an impression to ensure that you're going to get invited back for that all-important second meeting. Competition is really tough. There's lots of people looking for publishing deals. Publishers see hundreds of games presentations a year. So it's up to you to make sure that your game is as eye-catching and memorable as possible to have the best chance to landing yourself that publishing deal. That means spending time making your game looking as good as it possibly can. Publishers expect developers to do an awful lot of the work up front these days to demonstrate the commercial potential of their game. And I think the absolute minimum that you could expect to stand a chance with these days is maybe like a slide deck that says this is how the game is going to look, and some sort of playable demo to indicate the type of game it's going to be. So you can say, plays like this, and it's going to look like that. Imagine, you know, that's probably minimal. But realistically, you're going to need more than that to increase your chances. A video of some description that acts as a kind of sizzle reel for your game, I think that would be highly recommended. Something that really gets people excited when they're watching it, just to see what the potential of your game is. And the aim here, right, the ultimate aim is to turn all your new publishing contacts into internal evangelists for your game. So they're excited about the game. And most importantly, they want to tell their boss about it, because their boss isn't going to want to play the game. They're too busy. They just want to see how great it looks in the promotional media, which is why having some sort of sizzle video at that point really helps. Because remember this, right? Whoever you show your game to at a publisher will not be the decision maker. So even if they say they love your game and they tell you it's the best thing they've ever seen, they want to sign it, don't fall for it, right? They're going to have to convince a whole lot of people within their company. And flashy demos and slick videos are only going to get you so far, because ultimately the suits in the publisher will be caring about only one thing: numbers, right? So this is where the games business meets the business kind of head on. It's comparatively easy actually to get the game scouts at a publisher to have a meeting with you and tell you that they like your game. They're usually all gamers, and they're going to love what you love about the game. They're going to be excited about that. Business people, not so much. They're kind of like the publisher's second line of defense, and you have to win them over too, so be prepared. That means you're going to need to know the budget that you need to finish your game. You're now going to need some sort of business plan. You need to figure out whether you already have the expertise that you need in your team, or whether you're going to have to recruit people, what size of team you need, how many coders, artists, designers, who's doing your testing, who's doing your audio, who's doing localization. All of these questions are going to come up at this point, and you are going to get judged by the quality and credibility of your answers. So again, preparation is everything here. Speak to people, as David was and Jamie were suggesting, you know, speak to people who've done it before and use that as a guide. There's plenty of online communities where you can access that kind of information these days. And most people in the industry, including myself, David, etc., are really giving of their time and expertise if you go to the trouble of reaching out with a problem on social media, etc. It's also where experienced business advisors and accountants like Henderson Loggie can add value to your proposal, because we all have seen enough games being developed to know whether the budgets and the timescales and resources that you're proposing are going to sound credible to a publisher. Once you've got your playable demo to convince the game scouts how good your game and your team is, you've got a sizzle reel for your scouts to sell your game internally, and you've got a realistic budget, a schedule, and a resource plan, then you're finally ready to launch that charm offensive on an unsuspecting band of publishers. And it's time to start haranguing them. Now, persistence is really important here, because publishers receive an awful lot of inquiries and they sign a tiny number of the games that they look at. So don't be dispirited if you don't hear back on your first attempt. you really need to be prepared to contact them, follow up, leave it for a little while, contact them again, and don't give in until you have an answer, even if the answer is no. Some publishers use just simply ignoring emails as a barrier to separate out the developers who really want their attention from those who merely would like it. So be prepared. Remember, you've already weeded out all the inappropriate publishers when you did your homework. So that means you've got something compelling to offer. Make sure that you let them know what that is in the communication. And from that point, assuming you've done your homework well, then your foot's going to be in the door. There's plenty more to overcome at that point, all the legal issues such as intellectual property rights, revenue shares, etc., and so on. All of that's up for debate, but that's a conversation for another day. But following that path I've just outlined here, that's going to help you overcome those initial hurdles that new teams face, and at least get you on the radar of publishers and give you a fighting chance that you can turn your game into a great business. After that, there's only one thing more that you need to know, and that's the benefits of video games tax relief. So at this point, I'm going to hand you over to Grant at Henderson Loggie to tell you all about that.
Thanks very much for that, Colin. Thanks to all our speakers so far. It's hopefully given everyone quite a good insight into the games industry, and especially good hearing from people who have experienced it already. So my name is Grant Snedden. I'm an assistant tax manager at Henderson Loggie. And a lot of what I deal with is creative relief claims, which includes R&D and video game tax relief. So video game, when you set up a company, sort of whether you're employed or you set up your own games company, once you become profitable, you're going to have to pay tax in some form. So video games tax relief is an incentive which is aimed specifically at games companies to get a little bit of relief when you're making profits, or especially initially, you can get some cash back to help with any sort of cash flow. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the funding, and sort of any income that you might receive from publishers. Is obviously one of the hardest things, I think, at the start, getting a source of income from somewhere. So if tax relief is available to help you, then that's great. So I would stress now that it's only available to limited companies. So if you set up and you created this game with yourself or yourself and a partner, you can only get the relief if you actually set up a limited company and operate that way. So the relief available for the company is up to potentially 20%. This depends whether the company is profit-making or loss-making. I have a couple of examples in the future slides, which will hopefully make it a little bit clearer exactly how much you can get back. But first of all, to show that the game qualifies for the relief. Oh, sorry, Stephen's just said that we can't see my screen. Is that better now? Okay, so once you've created your game, what you need to do is apply to the BFI for a BFI certificate. So there's certain criteria that you have to meet in order to qualify. So the BFI have a total of 31 points that your game and your company, you need to meet 16 of those points to qualify for a certificate. So I've got on the screen here, the 4 key areas are content, contribution, hubs, and practitioners. So if we look at the first 2, this mainly looks at the actual game itself. So it looks at the setting of your game, the nationality of the characters in your game, the language that's spoken in your game. So there's, I think for each sort of area, there's maybe up to 4 points that you could potentially obtain. So whether you qualify for all 4 or maybe just 2 points, they kind of add up over the whole thing. As for points 3 and 4, this actually looks at you as a company and as individuals. So where has the game been created? What are the nationalities of the people involved in each aspect of the game, whether it be the programming, the artwork, these kind of areas. So the application is done through the BFI website, and there's a lot of great kind of background information on there just to tell you exactly how you can qualify. And in our experience, we found that the BFI are quite approachable as well. If you did have any queries, you can normally pick up the phone and speak to them, and they would be able to help you through the application process. So we'll look at the costs now. HMRC look at the game development process as being in 5 main stages. So you have your initial concept, Then you would have your designing, your producing, and your testing of the video game that you've created. And then finally, once the game is available for release to the public, there may be some post-release debugging and maintenance. So the core costs of the game are just the first 3 bullet points there: designing, producing, testing. And so these are the areas that you can obtain the extra tax relief for. Any costs relating to the initial concept and the post-release debugging and maintenance, they will still be eligible for corporation tax deductions, but they just won't be eligible for the extra video games tax relief. So we'll look here at specifically what some of the main costs are. The main costs would really be your salary costs, your subcontractor costs, and your IT costs. So it may be that you've acquired a source of funding, whether it's just yourself or yourself and a business partner. You decide to pay yourself a salary, so that costs, including any national insurance contributions that your company has to make, and also any pension contributions your company has to make. That can all be claimed for video games tax relief. It's quite important to distinguish here between salary and dividends. You may have heard of dividends as being another way to remunerate yourself if you're a shareholder, but these costs won't qualify for the tax relief. So even though there might be some savings to be made as an individual by being paid by way of dividends, we've kind of found overall in our experience, you're better making salary payments, because the benefits of claiming video games tax relief will generally outweigh any sort of income tax savings that you might make with dividends. The second cost on the list would be subcontractors. So it could be that yourself and your business partner develop a game, but there might be certain areas that you need to outsource, such as if you needed to outsource the audio, outsource even just like voice artists, that kind of thing. So any payments you make for any sort of outsourced areas of your game, you'll be able to claim video games tax relief for them. And the final main cost, I would say, would be your IT costs, which would just be any sort of software subscriptions, that kind of thing for developing your game. And a couple of the areas that are specifically not core costs for the game are advertising and accountancy. Advertising is deemed to be out with the area of core costs because the game has already been developed at this stage. So once you start advertising, this is just taking the game to market, and it's a commercial cost rather than an actual development cost. And similar can be said of accountancy, where the company would have to file accounts, tax returns, and that sort of thing, whether you make the video game or not. So these costs can't be included in any claim for video games tax relief. So I'm going to take you through a couple of examples just to show you what the main benefit could be from claiming the relief. And there's one example for a loss-making company and one example for a profit-making company. So the first example here, we'll look at a loss-making company who doesn't make a claim for video games tax relief. So it might be that you've obtained funding, you've decided to pay yourself a salary or pay yourself and a partner a salary. So the total staff cost in the year would be 50,000. You haven't taken the game to a publisher yet, so as of yet, there's no income in the company. And this just means that you have a 50,000 tax loss in the year for the company. So in this instance, there would be no tax to pay, but you would be able to carry forward this loss to the next accounting period. And when the game eventually does start making profits, the loss would be available to use against those profits. But in the same situation, if we make a claim for video games tax relief, so we're still looking at no income in the company, £50,000 of staff costs. And the way the relief works is that you get an 80% enhanced deduction on any qualifying core costs. So you would get an extra 40,000 for 50,000 spend of salary costs, which would look in the company, you would have a 90,000 loss in total. And for a loss-making company, what you can do is you can then surrender the enhanced deduction. So just the 80% of your salary costs, you can surrender that for a 25% tax credit. So this would mean that your company would get a credit from HMRC of £10,000. So this is like especially useful, I would say, for early stage companies where there's no income. Cash flow could potentially be a problem. So any money that you can get back from HMRC, I think, would certainly be worth it. So an extra £10,000 in your pocket can obviously go towards then paying costs in the next period and the next stage of development. The original £50,000 would still be available to be carried forward. So it's just the enhancement you surrender and you would still have a £50,000 loss for future periods. So in the second example, I'm just going to look at a profit-making company. So in this example, we have the same situation with the staffing costs. There's still £50,000 of costs, but you might have already taken the game to a publisher. Publishers will sometimes set milestones for the company to meet, and then once you've met each milestone, they'll make a payment. So in this example, we'll have a look at £100,000 of income received and £50,000 of costs. This would give you a £50,000 profit. So the current rate of UK corporation tax is 19%. So when you pay tax on the profits of 50,000, you would be looking at a £9,500 tax charge for the company. But if we make a claim for video games tax relief, again, you would get an enhanced deduction at 80% on the staff costs. So that's £40,000 again. And what this would do is this would reduce your taxable profits in the company by £40,000. So we would go from having a profit of 50,000 to a profit of 10,000. So 19% of the 10,000 is 1,900. And in this example, there would be an overall tax saving of 7,600. So hopefully that highlights that whether the company is profit making or loss making, there's still a big benefit in making a claim for video games tax relief. Just want to quickly cover off how the claims are made. You may be aware that your company would have to file accounts and tax returns, which is normally 9 months and 1 year after the end of an accounting period. But for video games tax relief, you have 2 years to submit a claim with the tax return. So if you're maybe looking at your first period now and it's going to end the 31st of December 2021, you would essentially have until the 31st of December 2023 to make your claim for video games tax relief. So any costs incurred over the next year, you would still have 2 years to make a claim. Hopefully that's kind of given you a brief overview anyway of the relief and some of the benefits. I'll hand over to Stephen for the Q&A, and if you have any further queries on the relief, just feel free to put them in the chat box and I'll try and cover as many as I can. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Grant. It was really, really interesting. And as Grant says, obviously, we put a few facts and figures up there on the screen, some worked examples, but that's the type of thing that likes of ourselves at Henderson Loggie can help you with in due course. As I said, we're going to take the last 10-15 minutes now, just do some questions. So if anyone's got anything they want to post, then please use the chat panel to do so. We have had a couple of questions come up, and as people registered for the event. So I'm just going to kind of post this and run through them. First question, Jamie, if I can maybe call upon you here. One of the questions that's been asked is, how did you fund your startup straight out of university? And what advice would you give to those thinking about following the same path?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on this in the talk, in that we didn't put any of our own money in. We used competitions and grants to kind of fund us. I know other people have gone down the route of just developing the game while they're at uni and then taking it to publishers to get that initial bit of funding. But thankfully, we didn't really want to go down that kind of route of publishers because we're not a typical kind of game that we're making anyway. And we didn't want to go to investors because that would then we'd have to give up shares for the money. So we tried to kind of bootstrap it by doing different competitions and grants. It was a very roundabout way, though, I should say.
Okay, thanks for that, Jamie. Next question I've got here. David, if I can ask you, what's the biggest misconception you had about starting the games industry, and what would you do differently today?
Yeah, it's basically, like I think it's Colin that said it. And Jamie touched on it as well, and I mentioned it. It's not just all about the game. I mean, when you come up with your game idea, you're going to love it. It's your game idea, and you're going to think there's a market for it. But regardless of that, if you don't do the stuff I mentioned with business development, then that game's going to go nowhere. Like I was doing the Dragon's Den thing last week with experienced businessmen in Perth who are moving into games, and I felt like I squashed their dreams, but I just had to tell them because they just thought their game was the best thing ever, and all the way through their presentation they're just going on about how it's going to be the next $100 million franchise, and I'm just thinking, oh my god, like I just had to ask them, like, how are you going to make that $100 million franchise? And they didn't know how they were going to sell their game. They didn't know how they were going to market it. They were just going to hopefully get a publisher to deal with all that. And when you're starting a games company, it's not all about the game. So I did it. I mean, I thought my Baby Grow was the best thing ever. Still think it was. Still think it could work. But there's loads of them now. But it was like the world's first Tamagotchi inspired by Tamagotchi games, so it was a virtual baby. So yeah, that was what I would do differently. I would do my research, I would attend these events, and hopefully somebody would have said to me, you can't just make a game, you need to do the work behind it. So okay, that's what I would do.
There's quite a few questions we've had coming in regarding at what point should you set up a business, and Colin made the point about a games business becoming a real business, and linked to that, should you set up a limited company? I think one thing to make clear is that Grant touched upon it on his chat as well. The video games tax relief, which is a really useful tax relief from HMRC, is available only to limited companies. So if you were to set up a business and trade as a sole trader or even a partnership, then you're not in the corporate tax system. So therefore that relief wouldn't be available to you. So if you are setting up a business, there is certainly an advantage to be said for having it as a limited company, aside from all the legal safeguards that having a limited company would have. In terms of timing, I mean, Jamie obviously made reference to the fact that he started his business when he was at university, and then made the leap to go full time. Others have gone to work for a games company first of all to get that experience. And my take from the people I've met in the industry, it's very much a personal thing based on your entrepreneurial spark. It's kind of like any sort of, some people have thought of getting a real job, even if working for a lot of people think working in the games industry isn't a real job. But at the end of the day, there's a big difference between having, and the major difference for working in a job, paid employment, is at the end of the month, whether the particular company is doing well or not. If you're an employee, the chances are you're going to get a salary at the end of the month. Whereas if you set up by yourself, then that's the big thing that's missing, is where's the revenue going to come from? And it's not like if you start a sweetie shop, then you're going to have customers on day one. Developing a game is a long process. So that's where the route that Jamie explained, going down for looking for external funding, whether that's actually investors investing in the game, or initially it's more likely to be kind of grants and awards that are available. And that's I suppose the hardest challenge for somebody starting up in a game, is if you don't have a job, first of all, is having enough revenue to live on while you do that. Colin, the question's coming, which is probably relevant for you to answer. How do you stay in control of your company and your game when a publisher is putting pressure on you, maybe to get to the next milestone?
The problem with that is it's so circumstantial. It depends. There's just so many depends. But basically what I would say is, if the publisher's putting pressure on you to get a milestone delivered and you're not able to do it, or you don't feel it's the right thing to do, I like to look at the kind of the deeper problem as to why is that happening, right? So because sometimes it can be because you don't have the skills in your team in order to actually deliver the milestone. So programming might be running behind, or art isn't happening fast enough, whatever it is. So the first thing I would say is use it as an opportunity to flag whatever it is that the problem stems from, right? Because it could be that. It could also be that you're working with the wrong publisher, right? And that's another part of going back to what I was saying earlier on about doing research before you try and find a publisher. Is the times it's worked worst for me is when I've ended up signing with a publisher, and this happens quite a lot, where you do your research, you get you get everything lined up, you get the deal, everybody's happy, it's all how it's going to work, and then one or two key people in the publisher leave, or they get replaced, or the publisher gets bought, and suddenly you're dealing with a whole bunch of new people. Things like that can cause a whole lot of friction as well. So unfortunately, there's no easy answer to that. Game development is kind of like, I guess, 1/3 compositional and 2/3 improvisational, in that you can only plan so much, and then you just have to kind of roll with the punches and try and figure it out as you go. And I think that's why some of the people you're hearing from today, like Jamie and David, have done so well in this, is that they're great at rolling with the punches and figuring out how you know, how we're going to fix this, how we're going to fix it. It's that entrepreneurial spirit of looking at the problem right in front of you and figuring out how to you know, how to fix that. So no easy answer, but use it as an opportunity to try and identify some root causes that you can fix for the longer term at the very least.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Got another question here which I'm going to direct towards Grant because it's on the VGTR. Grant, is there a minimum threshold for making a VGTR claim? Does it apply only to certain size of companies?
No, at all. There's no thresholds. I think when Jamie was speaking earlier, he kind of said initially they maybe only had 20,000 in the business. As long as that 20,000 was spent on qualifying costs, so costs relating to designing, producing and testing, you'd still be able to claim relief on that, which it might result in $4,000 cash back. But of course it's still better than nothing. The only cap there really is in relation to subcontractors, but this will only apply to sort of the larger multinational companies, because per game there's a maximum of 1 million that you can spend on subcontractors. So it might obviously affect sort of companies like Rockstar and whatnot, but for early stage companies it's unlikely you'll be spending anywhere near that much until you have a few successful games. So that's probably the only cap that there really is to speak of.
Can I just jump in and add that you also don't need, the game doesn't even need to be finished. You can get like interim certificates from the British Film Institute and claim on a game that hasn't been finished as well.
So, yeah. Thanks, Jamie.
No, it's a good point to make. Because yeah, as Jamie said, there's interim and final certificates available. So if your project's only going to span maybe 1 or 2 years, it might just be wait until the end of the project, get a final certificate, and you can make your claims in one go. But your development might take 4 or 5 years. And then if that's the case, you can apply for an interim certificate. You can claim cash back as you develop. And then at the very end, once the game has been completed, you would then apply for a final certificate. So yeah, so the relief's available through all stages of developing the game.
Thanks, Jamie, and thanks, Grant, for that. I'm looking at the chat panel. I think we've one of the questions I think somebody's actually passed on to everybody as well. I think one of the things that comes through all the time, and both Colin and David touched on it today, is the collaboration and the non-competitiveness of those with experience in the games industry. We see it here, in the Dundee area where we're based, and there's a great games community. But I think it applies wider than that as well. There's so many people who've gone through great journeys and are very prepared to share their experience. I think there is that spirit came through loud and clear this afternoon. And not everybody's going to have every answer you need, but as David says, build a network of contacts. And that could include people like ourselves here, and we're accountants, but we're more than that, we're advisors. Now, we'll help you with your accounts, your tax, your business plan, all the kind of business elements to that. But we may not know a specific answer in relation to how to deal with a publisher. But we know a man who will be able to help you with that, and we can put you in touch or ask the question on your behalf. If it comes to the legal side of things, when it comes to the IP of the game, again, there's the specialist lawyers who can get involved, and we've got contacts in the industry. Build your own network of contacts, and then just ask questions, because everybody is there to help. And particularly for in the early stages, it can be a very lonely sort of existence for yourself, your business partners. So do come forward and ask the questions when they arise. I think we're pretty much on time, which is really good. I would just like to say, firstly, thank you to everybody for taking the time out your busy schedules to attend today. Hopefully you'll have got something very useful to take away. And to our speakers, to Jamie, who's obviously very fresh and starting out in the business, David and Colin, who've been around for a fair bit longer, I think it's fair to say, some great experiences, and really always entertaining to hear you guys speak, and Grant from our own tax department, and to Josh from TAG as well. A very big thank you to everybody. Andy Campbell of our own marketing team, who sent the invitations for the event, will follow up after the event with some information and contact details and so on. And feel free to watch the recording of this again and to get in touch if you've got any queries. But I'll just sign off by once again saying thanks very much to joining our event today, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.